show where I try to educate real stories. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. We have another exciting show for you tonight. We have in the studio Mr. Tharon Bush. The title of our show tonight is Success After Incarceration. He wants to tell you about his successful life after 3 times to the penitentiary. I also have co-hosting with me Mr. Rudolfo Cantu. He is a very experienced and prominent criminal defense lawyer and friend, and he will comment and ad-lib as we go along tonight. As you know, our show is to try to educate you about the criminal justice system through people's stories. And Mr. Bush has so graciously tonight agreed to tell his story, his life story, so that we can learn something from it. So, Mr. Bush, without any further ado, thank you for volunteering to tell your story.
You're more than welcome. It's an honor to be invited, to have opportunity to come out, you know, and speak and share my success after incarceration.
Perfect,
Right.
perfect. I want you to tell us chronologically about a little bit about your childhood, and we'll just move rapidly through it to kind of figure out what caused your life of crime, your young life of crime.
Okay. As a child, I grew up in a single parents home. My father left when I think I was about 4 or 5, and that took a major effect on me.
Wow.
Life just from childhood.
And why did that affect you so if you were so young?
I bonded with my daddy. I loved him so much.
Wow.
Role model. And I just looked up to him because we did everything together. You know, rodeo, church, circus, football games, basketball games, during this time now with me and my mother. And so during his departure, it just left me I felt abandoned. And so I developed anger within myself. I developed an attitude with my mother, my family, everybody. And I began to shelter myself. I didn't want to be around nobody. I didn't want to play with other kids. And so when my mother recognized that attitude, she took me to her mother, my grandmother. And so my grandmother started raising me.
How old were you then?
I was like I had to be about 11 or 12.
Okay.
Right. 11 or 12. And that's when I started trying to, revenge, because grandmother would give me some leeway. And that's when I started making my moves, taking advantage, going to get high. I go spend the weekend with some of my uncles. They were using and they'll, put me down. And that's how it just progressed it.
Now, let's go back just a minute. Now, when your parents were married and your daddy abandoned you and you were about 4, your father went on to marry someone else, and that woman had 2 sons, right?
Right.
But your father was still a hardworking man, and he came and got you on weekends, right?
Right.
So that wasn't enough to see him on the weekends?
That wasn't enough.
Why
I
not?
wanted him in my life.
Were you a little envious because he was raising someone else's children?
Very envious.
Okay.
Yes.
But yet you were close to those kids.
I was close to my stepbrothers.
Okay.
But my dad, I just didn't, I wasn't in agreement with that, him being away from me.
Right. Right. So when you developed the anger and your mother couldn't handle it anymore, you said you went to live with your mother's mother then?
Right,
your
my grandmother, right.
Okay. And so since you had more leeway, you started experimenting with drugs. Now, what was the drug you started with and what age?
Marijuana. I was 12 years old. I started smoking marijuana, and I would drink beer on occasionally.
Okay, but you were still going to school.
Still going to school.
Okay.
Getting high.
And going to school.
And going to school.
Were you spending more time with your father at this time or less time?
I began to spend less time with him. It was like he might come one time out of the month, like on the weekends.
Okay. All right. Did your father have any idea that you were smoking marijuana at that time?
I believe he had an idea.
Really? How?
Idea. When I would come around and he'd be like, man, why your eyes so red? You know, and I'd be laughing, you know, and sometime he'd come pick me up and taking me home. I'd just be laughing. I'd be high. And so, and then I know he really discovered because I started going in his stash.
Oh, he did marijuana?
Right.
Oh, even though he was a working man?
Right.
So how did you know? He talked to you about doing it? How did you know he smoked marijuana?
I was always off into, I was what you call a rambler, prowler.
Nosy.
Nosy. And I would go in my daddy's cars and I would look around his glove compartment, his trunk, you know, and that's how.
You'd snoop.
Right.
So that would be on your visitations to his house. You'd snoop in his stuff.
Right.
Okay, so you started taking his stash.
Right.
And then he noticed it.
Right. Then my uncles.
Okay.
I learned their stash. I started taking from them. And then eventually I started working and was able to buy my own.
How old were you when you started working?
I started working when I was in high school, about 15 or 16.
And
I worked half a day.
Where?
At Washington, Booker T. Washington.
Okay, you went to Booker T. Washington High School, right?
Right.
Here in Houston.
Right.
And so where were you working?
I was working at CCP Coffee Company. It was a plant over off there, 290.
How would you get there?
Drive. I had a car.
Okay. All right. So 12th grade, you dropped out of school. Why?
I dropped out my drug habit.
So it got worse. It went from marijuana
Right.
to what?
I went to smoking what you call was wet.
And what's that?
That's amp. That's like embalming fluid. Right.
So you would put the embalming fluid on the weed?
It's.
Or you just dip it in there?
No, it's already.
Cigarette?
They dip it in marijuana, and you could sell what you call. You could buy one for $7 stick, or you can get a $30 paper.
Now that wet makes you kind of crazy, doesn't it?
Right. It's like a form of PCP.
Right.
Right.
Right. All right. So you've lost some of your brain cells, huh? So you really got a success story.
Actually, I hallucinated where I was seeing devils and pink elephants, and I had to go be rushed to Bentarb Hospital.
How old were you?
I was like about in my early 20s.
Okay, so
Right.
it got worse to where you
Right.
started hallucinating.
Right, but see, not only that, I would drink syrup, take pills all at one time.
Now, why were you doing that?
Because I life just was meaningless to me at the time when my father left. And then it's like I got misdirected because, you know, I felt that as long as I had that father figure and a role model now, that I had to carry myself, you know, a certain way. But when sons are with a mother, they take the advantage of that. They play on the weak side, you know. And mother give more leeway opposed to father. He gonna be strict, you know, and take a stand when you getting out of line. And so that's what, you know, just made me angry like that. So I used drugs to calm myself because I encountered some things.
Right.
With my dad, it's like, you know, him being the head of the household, he left me as a prey to the predator.
Right.
Right. And
Like
so,
what?
you know, like me and I wanted to.
Like me and your mother was dating?
No, like guys out in the street. Right. I wanted to hang out with them, and that's how I got off more deep into drugs, selling drugs, you know. I looked up to them as role model. Role model,
people.
right.
Okay,
the wrong people.
That's how you got misdirected, because you started.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I felt like if he would have been there, that wouldn't have happened.
That's a lot of pressure you put
Right.
on your dad, but I understand the pain.
Right.
Okay. So the first time, you went to prison 3 times, is that right?
Right.
The first time in 1989. How old were you then? About 25?
About 25. I was turning 25.
You was about to turn 25.
Right.
So you got to do what you were doing for a little while before you got caught.
True.
How'd you get caught?
On the last case? Or
The first one.
The first one?
We're going chronologically.
By a undercover.
So you sold to an undercover.
Right. Well, actually, I sold to an informant that was working for undercover.
Was it in your neighborhood, Acres Home?
Right. And so, the strange thing, the guy lived about 2 blocks from the projects where I was living.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. So when you went to court on this case, so it couldn't have been much drugs, was it? How much was it, under a gram?
Under a gram.
So for under a gram, did you get probation?
No.
But back then it was under 28 grams.
Right.
But the quantity you had was under a gram.
Right.
So it was delivery of a controlled substance under 28 grams.
Right. Correct.
And you did not get probation
No, they sentenced me to Texas Department of Correction
for 5
for
years.
5 years.
Why so long? That's unusual. Why didn't you get probation?
I don't have a clue because I really didn't have a juvenile history record.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Did you go
Right.
for
I
juvenile?
didn't go to juvenile.
Now, Rudy, thank you for joining the show tonight.
Thanks for inviting me, Ms. King.
So, Mr. Cantu, what do you think about that? In '89, we weren't practicing yet. I'd started law school in '89. You started in '88, right?
Correct.
So, what do you think? Isn't that a lot of time
That's
for a first
a lot
time?
of time.
And I remember when we first started practicing, I was a prosecutor in '92, and Mr. Cantu was a practicing defense lawyer. You know, they changed the category. So back then it was under 28 grams, but I thought people got probation even back then. So
Right.
you know, but you didn't. So you never even thought about it when you were in jail? Did you bond out?
I didn't bond out.
Did you hire an attorney?
I had a court-appointed lawyer.
Okay.
My addiction, I couldn't afford it. But when I'm saying 5 years now, 5 years, not 5 years day for day.
No, I know, but your sentence on your record, it would
Right,
be 5
5
years.
years, okay,
Right.
right.
But the prisons were overcrowded then by '89, so 5 years didn't. How long did you stay?
Stayed like about 7 months.
Okay. And then your second case, you told me before we went on the air, you got another delivery case in 1990, so like a year later, a year and a half later.
About a year later.
Now, how did you get that? Did you sell into undercover again?
Sold to another undercover.
How much time did they give you that time?
I think it was 8 years.
So you never got probation and violated your probation. You never got probation.
Never got probation.
That's unusual.
I never.
Okay, so the second time you get 8 years. Okay, and then how long do you stay then?
I stayed like about, I think I stayed like about 9 months, something like that.
Whoa, they wouldn't give you any time. So 9 months on 8 years. Wow. And the first time you said when you got 5 years, you did about 10 months? Did you say that?
First time, about 7 months.
About 7 months. Okay, and then let's graduate. You get out and you're on bond. I mean, you're on parole.
Right.
And so the big one, number 3. So tell me what was going on in your life.
That's when I was out there.
So as soon as you got out of prison, you started doing dope again.
It was like about after 6 months.
Why?
Just the pressure.
If you can think back, it was a long time ago, 1990, 91, but what do you think the pressure was?
I mean, the environment where I lived.
the pressure to keep doing it.
Right, to
Not
keep
like
doing
you
it.
were under pressure,
Right.
but just to do
Right,
what
just-
everybody else is doing.
No matter what. And then, within my mind, I hadn't really completely made up my mind totally that I wanted to stop. So being in the environment, the friends, that put pressure on me, So,
What about getting a job? Did you think about that?
yes,
Did you get a job?
I got a job.
Oh,
I never had a problem getting jobs, never.
okay. So what would you do? Just sell the dope on the side of the job? Is that how you'd sell undercovers?
I was selling on the side.
To support your habit, but you had a job too.
Right, I had a job. I didn't keep them long because of my habit.
Okay.
But that was, I would try to work, and then after a period of time, I'd be late.
Yeah.
Then they would notice my production declining, and then they would notice my appearance. I started losing weight, so they'd question me. And then I wouldn't go back. I figure like they know what's happening with me.
Right. So let's talk about the last case, the big case, the aggravated robbery. Tell me how that happened.
The aggravated robbery, I was high on crack. I don't know what kind of dope that was, but it just had me just like evil, vicious.
And you never felt like that before?
I never felt like that before,
Really?
really.
So, but you had was that your first time using crack, or had you used it before?
I had used it I smoked like 5 years. I smoked like from '89 to my last fall.
Okay, so from '89 to
Off and on.
Off and on, okay.
Right.
when you get out. All right, so this last drugs you got, now tell me what it made you do, or in your mind, what did you do?
And crack, I was sitting over in the projects where I would hang out, and my friend was there. I said, man, I need to go make a lick. He said, yeah, because we used to, smoke together. After I go over to his apartment. And he said, well, I want to go with you. I said, no, man, this one might be on to death. And he just got quiet. He said, what you mean? I said, yeah, man. I said, I'm not myself. I'm my mind, I never felt like this before.
Really?
And so I walked down the street. I said, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna kick that door in, and I'm gonna get the first thing I can. But I never had a chance to get to the door.
Really? What happened?
The person met me at the door with a gun.
Wow. Did
And
they shoot you?
They warned me. They say, leave. I say, and I just stood there. And I guess the look that I had on my face put fear in them. And they just started shooting.
So he shot you?
Shot me.
Oh, I didn't know that. You
Right.
got shot?
Shot
Where did he shoot you?
right here in my right arm.
Wow. So what happened after that?
After that, I ran.
Did you run?
I ran, and I started bleeding. So I just passed out right in the front of a Circle K.
Now, tell me what area this is. What
It
neighborhood?
was an Acres Home
It's
right
still in
there.
Acres Home.
Acres Home.
Okay. So, okay. All right. So you start bleeding and you fell out at a Circle
Right.
K.
When I kind of like was opening up my eyes, I was just seeing laws
Yeah.
everywhere. Right. And so they put me in the ambulance and they took me on to the hospital. Got to the hospital, they put me in the waiting room because my body was so drugged up they couldn't do surgery, perform surgery on me.
Wow.
And so my family coming out, I said, how did y'all know I was here at LBJ? Because it was on the news. That's how my little sister had found out.
Wow.
Right.
So I guess the guy who shot you called the police too.
I think so.
Because the Circle K could have called the police because you collapsed bleeding
Right.
in front of the store too. So I'm just wondering if you know how the police got
I
there.
don't know if the guy called or if Circle K, but all I know when I come to myself, it was a lot of laws and record truck drivers around me.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So how long did you have to stay in the hospital?
I stayed in the hospital for about, I think they kept me like 2 weeks and they sent me to the county and put me on the medical floor.
Okay. So it's a bad shot then if you stayed for 2 weeks.
Right. Well, actually, I was paralyzed in this arm.
Okay.
Right.
So he got you good. What kind of gun did he shoot you with? Do you know?
It was a 22
Oh, it's small.
long barrel hollow point stove.
Okay.
And what happened, when it hit me, the bullet exploded and damaged some nerves and blowed a big hole in my bone.
Gotcha. So
Right.
2 weeks, that's a long time. So once you got shot and you did the 2 weeks and then you got transferred to the county, how'd that go?
Transferred to the county.
Yes, sir.
Then that's when, they started getting ready to send me back and forth to court, sentencing. Then that's when I began to really look at myself.
And what did you see?
I needed to change. I really did.
So about how old are you then? So you
I turned, actually, I think I turned
about 27?
27 in the county jail.
Wow.
And the strangest thing, the activities that was going on out there was in there.
Like what?
Right, like crack.
In the
Right,
county jail?
yes.
Wow.
And that's what my change. I wanted to buy a $10 rock
In jail?
in jail, and I got mad because it was like they was ignoring me.
Who
I
was
said, "Man,"
ignoring you?
the guys that was getting
fellas.
high, right. I say, man, I want to get high. I want rock. They wouldn't. And I knew right then it was over with for me.
I don't understand that. If they're doing it, did you not have the money for it? Is that why? Or the
I
commissary?
had the money, right.
Okay.
Right.
You had the money.
Right.
So why do you think they wouldn't give it to you?
I don't know. I don't know. Right to this day. But I kept on just hollering. It's like they were just ignoring me.
Interesting.
Right.
So that's an interesting revelation. So they don't give you the crack, even though you want it, and that makes you look at yourself?
Right.
Tell me what it made you see.
It made me realize that this is not for me. And I seen guys in there was getting high and the way they was reacting. And I say, man, this is the way I act. I literally had a chance to see it,
Sober. You were sober.
Right. And in the place that I was in,
How were they getting that crack in the jail?
I don't know. I don't have no idea.
I never knew that. I've always heard of it, but I've never heard anybody actually tell me.
But actually, it's always on the news, how, those activities transpire.
They're so strict on the lawyers.
Right.
When we go to the jail, we couldn't get anything in there if we wanted to. We can barely bring a pen.
Really?
They're so tough on us. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So tell me more. Okay. So you go to prison. So how do you get to 25 years? Because you're 25 to life. That's why.
Right. Because I was a 3-time offender.
So what was the original plea bargain on your third case?
On the third case,
60
it was
years?
no plea.
Did you tell me they were trying to give you 60 years at one point?
They were.
And so how?
And they went to 45, but habitual carriers.
25 to life.
Right.
So they could give you any number.
Right. but I plead for the 25.
Did you ask for it, or you just succumbed to it?
Well, after a year sitting in the county jail, I said, well, let me go ahead and take some time.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is most people who get shot during a robbery, I've had clients who've gotten shot in robberies, they feel like since they got shot, they ought to not do no time. Did you feel that way?
I didn't feel that way.
How'd you feel?
I felt that I needed to do some time.
Really?
Right.
Why is that?
To find myself. And I took the advantage of that because I felt like that I could have been dead.
You sure could have been dead.
And I wasn't mad at the system or, nobody. I was
Were you
just,
mad at the man that shot you?
No, at myself. The lifestyle I come, my family, educated, entrepreneurs, wealthy, lawyers, doctors, dentists, I come from that type of family background.
And even though your daddy smoked weed, he worked all his life.
Worked all his life.
And he's 75
Right.
and still kicking, right?
Kicking.
Kicking good, you said, right?
Real good.
Wow. So that's an interesting story. Rudy, what do you think about what he said so far? It's kind of interesting, don't you think?
I had a question for Mr. Bush. Do you think your life would have turned out different if your daddy would have been with you ever since you started growing up, since you were 4?
I know it would have.
And it would have been, of course, more positive, you think?
Very positive. I would have been a very successful, probably businessman, lawyer, a doctor, with the drive that my daddy had toward me.
So do you want to tell something to the viewers that are out there that are considering abandoning their sons or children?
Right.
Tonight?
Yes, I would like to. That's dangerous, to abandon your child. You're setting them up for all type of, things that's out in the world that can destroy their lives. And I know it get difficult sometimes, but I feel like that's not a reason to abandon your child. I abandoned my older children because of my incarceration. And I hold that against myself. And so I feel like that when a man abandons his child, it's like he really abandoned himself, because he's the reason why that child is here.
Right.
Right. And running shouldn't be the option.
Right. We didn't talk about this in front of the viewers, but you told me right before we went on that you have 5 children.
Right.
You had 2 by different women when you were out there doing your
Right.
drugs, so when you were young.
Right.
So those are the 2 you abandoned, right?
Right.
Because you were going to jail.
Right. Well, actually, the first 4.
Oh, the first 4.
Right.
Okay.
I abandoned.
Okay, but you had 2, and then you got married and had 2. Right.
I got married and had 2. Then I remarried and I had 1.
Okay, you have 1 now.
Right.
All right, so the first 4 are the ones you think you abandoned.
Right.
Okay, now, so how did you reconcile that, knowing that your issues were coming from your father abandoning you and you abandoning your children? How did you process that?
In that strand, I thought that was going to be difficult, Miss King, and it wasn't. I was just myself.
Selfish.
And one concern about nobody else. You talking about like abandoning my children, right? Okay, yes.
So you didn't think, if I don't stop getting high, I can't be with my kids. If I go back to prison, I can't be with my kids.
Right.
I mean, you weren't thinking that. You were just thinking about yourself and
Right,
wanting
at
to
that
get high.
time, I just wanted to get high.
Was it because you didn't love your kids enough, or was that drug just so strong on you?
It just overpowered
strong,
me.
huh? That-
right.
that crack is strong,
It took
isn't
me
it?
so far that I wanted out, but I couldn't
You didn't know
come
how to
out.
get out.
Right. That's a strong drug, and it gives you a craving, and it deals with your mind.
Right.
Right, real strong. And so that's what it was so hard for me, and it hurted me to be like that, because I was like the best dressed in high school, well known, and for me to tarnish my character like that, it hurted people to see me like that.
I bet it did.
Yes.
It's hurt me when I've seen friends that
Right.
gone that way. So you quit in the 12th grade, so you got your GED while in prison, right?
Right.
Okay. You told me you got that at the Smith unit up in
Smith unit in Lamesa, Texas.
Okay. What other education did you get in prison?
I got 3 vocational trades. I got a small, appliance repair. I got a vocational trade for auto cab computer. And then I had got another vocational trade for, let me think. I can't think of it right now, but I got 3.
Okay, so that's a long haul to do
Right.
10 years. I mean, you went in for aggravated robbery in 1991. Now, for the viewers, the law hadn't changed to halftime then. The law changed to halftime in either 92 or 94. I can't remember which year that was, Rudy. But if you can remember, you can tell me. But in 91, it was still a fourth of the time.
Right.
You had to do before you were eligible for parole, which means that you could have a date in which you met before the parole board to try to ask them to let you out or say, I've been good and I deserve to get out the first time. If they don't let you out, then you get set off. So the reason why in his first two cases he got out so fast is the parole time, the jails were the prisons were extremely crowded. And so I think it was between 1992 and 94, I forget which one, I think it was like 94. Yeah, 94. I became a lawyer in 92, so the laws were still the same when I became a lawyer. It was 94 when Ann Richards got defeated and Bush got in. Daddy Bush was the first governor. That's when all the laws changed.
Right.
So because actually the penal code had been the same for either 30 or 50 years before then. All the laws had been the same up to 1992, 94. And so that's when, in 94 is when they made aggravated robbery halftime. They created the state jail system because most people were doing 25 years, a minimum of 25 to life on less than a gram cases. And to give viewers an idea of a gram is a sweet and low pack or a little sugar pack. So people are doing 25, 30, 40, 50 years because it's their third time getting caught with less than a gram of cocaine.
Right.
And so the legislators decided that let's create a nonviolent offender section. When Ann Richards was there, she had programs. Like you didn't have to go to prison. You could go to, I forgot some of those programs, but there were some programs you could go to instead of going to jail. And some of them were at the Harris County Jail. They had alternatives to incarceration. But when George Bush became the governor and his regime, legislators, they created the state jail system, which was separate prison facilities. And the less than a gram cases and the forgeries and the thefts, all of the nonviolent cases went there. And it was day for day, no parole system. And so when that happened in 94, anybody that got sentenced at that time that was just getting in and out like you were at first, you there now.
Right.
You there now because they got bed spaces. And people, one of the hardest questions I think as a lawyer, if we have a client that has a difficult case and they're guilty, so we can't beat the system, we have to plead them out because we can't win. And but they want to know when they're gonna get out, Rudy. And what do you tell people when they say when am I gonna get out if they have to go to prison? What do you tell them?
Well, we look at all the facts, details, and come up with a number, hopefully close enough to what they're going to get,
Yeah.
the sentence they're going to receive.
That's what we try to do. So you never know, because when you got to 25 years, what was the first thing you wanted to know? When am I gonna get out? Right?
I did.
You didn't? Well, you're different. That's
Right.
unusual. Everybody else wants to know when they're gonna get out.
I wasn't concerned about that. I really wasn't.
Wow.
Right, because my uncle told me when I said he got me this time, and he's from San Antonio, very wealthy man, love him. He said, make the best of it. You know, and I thought he was gonna be the one to lecture me, like everybody else. I told you, you know, and you should have come over here and that. But I had my mind made up that I was gonna use the system to turn my life around.
And how did you do that?
When I first got locked up, the first thing I did, I started praying because I didn't want to get caught up. And as I was praying, it's like in the cell, it was about, I'll never forget, October 22nd, and about 3
October
p.m.
22nd when?
October 22nd, 1992.
Okay.
I started praying. It's like the cell just lit up. And it's like I couldn't open my eyes. So I said, what's wrong with me? So I just heard something say, you're going to be all right this time. What happened, my cellie come in there with a sack full of weed. And when he got in the cell, he said, man, you down. I couldn't even say nothing because of that encounter that I had with God. It affected me. I was speechless, like for about a month.
Really?
So I go to what they call child.
Now, was it still in Harris County or now you're
I'm
prison?
in the system now.
Where are you at?
Lamesa.
Let me see. Okay.
When I come back, my cellie, he had moved out of there. Now, this is 2 encounters that I had while incarcerated, have an opportunity to get drugs. So I knew then, and I said, I'm gonna work this system to my advantage. I'm gonna work it. This is gonna be my change. And I began to do research. And then people started coming to me, you know. Then my friends were saying I was losing my mind because I didn't want to go record rate. I said, if I'm gonna do time, I'm not working on fields, I'm gonna use that education department and get everything I can. Once I get out of one vacation or school or changes, whatever they had, I would get involved. And then I started going to church. Then that opened up doors for me. I was having access to go out and sing in the community, wherever we was, you know, incarcerated. And then I had the opportunity to be on the radio. Then I had the opportunity to be on TBN while I was incarcerated with Mike Barber's ministry, and wasn't even aware of. My family was calling me and writing me on television. And so when those things started happening, it's like something ignited on the inside of me to give me a drive. And don't you know, I literally got my mind to the fact to where sometimes I would forget that I was incarcerated.
Wow.
That's how desperate I was for a change in my life. I just made up my mind, I'm not gonna go back out there. I'm gonna be a father. I'm gonna be that son that my mother was looking for in my father, you know? And I'm gonna wanna be an effect on my family. So I just continued on, you know, I didn't socialize with negative people. I socialized with positive people.
In prison?
In prison. I started setting up my resume. I would go to the law library. I just did anything to get info, you know? And so that's when things began to really seem like the more that I would invest and possess, you know, within me as far as the knowledge, the more I would just, you know, have a drive to change.
That's impressive.
And change. And
Very
then I just
impressive.
started just people that would come in from prison ministries, they started, you know, connecting with me, showing it, you know, just always was concerned, things like that, you know, caring. And then, you know, that started making me, I started feeling that love. You know, that real, genuine, today we got commercial love, but that agape love, people that really care for you and really listen to you. And then even some of the officers began to respect me. And it got to where I had become the change that I was making in prison, that it began to affect other men until the warden and the majors would call me in the office asking me, was I involved in any type of gang? What was I doing to cause so many people to come to me, you know? And I would tell them, it's nothing, they just come to me. I didn't have no reason why, but I discovered after a while I started encountering with brothers that was in the Word, that was trying to get their life together. And God started speaking through them to reveal to me, you know, what was happening with me. And so that's I just continued on. But I never was, that's what, my time was so easy. I didn't get upset with the system.
10 years is a long time.
But see, the secret was, before I got incarcerated, I had already made my mind up that I was gonna deal with the consequences.
Okay.
I said, whatever time they give me, however long I have to stay, I had accepted it.
Wow, that's deep.
Because I was out there bad, I'm telling you, bad.
Well, if you're about to kick in somebody's door and got shot, you out there bad.
Right, I was out there bad. So I used the system to my advantage, and it worked.
You don't hear people say that often, do you?
Right.
No.
I did. Whatever. If you had something, if you was an officer or major, I was relentless. I was gonna get it, especially if I figured that it was gonna build up me, my character, or whatever my plans were, or projects that I was working on. Yes.
So explain what you mean. If they were a major, you were going to get it. I don't understand.
I mean, you know, if they had access, if like say if I needed some type of, like to make a phone call or something like that, or some type of material, you know, to get from my family to get in, you know, like written material and stuff like that, then I would go to them. Or sometime, you know, we would have problems getting our stuff in because of certain policies that they have, and they would work with me.
I see.
Right.
Try to get you like
Right.
books
Help
or
me
things
out.
that
Right.
you want.
Right.
Okay. Because it is difficult. I've
Right.
sent things to my clients in prison.
Because they
books.
seen what I was doing. They knew that I wasn't trying to do anything negative. They knew I was trying to always do something positive.
Well, that's good. So, did you get set off ever, or did you get out on your first parole?
They set me off.
How many times?
I think about 5 times.
Tell me about that experience. So, do you actually physically go to the parole board?
You go to the parole board, Sometimes the commissioner come. Sometimes just one of the members will come that's on the board, and they'll talk to you, and then they'll question you, and then they won't come back and give you an answer. They'll mail it to you.
Would you have a feeling that you were going to make parole, or would you have a feeling?
I knew I was going to be there for a while.
How'd you know?
I just felt that on the inside. I did. I said, I'm going to be here for a long time. They told me, you're going to go down and you get a quarter, you're going to do 4 years. But I knew better than that. I said, the lifestyle that I was living, it's going to take longer.
Okay, well, it's good you were accepting it. So
Right.
you got about 5 set-offs, and when you got out, what was the first thing you did? You paroled to your father, so he was willing to allow you to
Right.
parole to his house.
Right.
Because he always loved you,
Right.
right? So tell us about that. Did you actually live with him?
I lived with him.
And did he still have you still have the stepmother at that time?
She was there.
Were the boys there, the sons?
They wasn't there.
They had grown up.
They were grown up.
And so what happened?
When I moved in, the first thing I wanted to do is get me a job. And he said, well, no, son, just, take you some time out, about 90 days to 6 months. I said, no, that's a setup, Dad. I said, I'm ready to get, because I already had my life planned out what I was going to do. And I said, no, so he helped me get a job at Pepsi Cola.
Okay. Now, a lot of kids, young people tell me they can't get jobs when they have records, but yet you get off and get a job, and
I
you've
get a
done
job
3
easy. I know I have a package and a conversation, and I sell myself and my presentation, It means a lot. Sometimes I would go on interviews in a suit, slacking pants,
So what were you doing at Pepsi when you first got your first?
I was a forklift driver over there.
Okay. Did you learn that while in prison, or did you already know how to do that?
I learned that at Pepsi Cola.
Oh, they taught you. Okay.
Right when they hired me, the man just put me on the forklift drive, and he gave me a work order, and he told me to go to work. And I did some damage,
I bet you did.
but after a while I learned it. And I was one of the best forklift drivers.
What kind of damage you did? You had a wreck? Or you
Knocking
dropped
over
something?
those cases, the sodas, flipping them over, trying to get them in those bays.
Not balanced.
Right, balance, turning them corners too fast.
Okay.
But eventually I got it.
Okay. How long did you work there?
I worked there for about 6 months.
And then where'd you go? Why'd you leave after 6 months?
It was up for the temp agency.
Okay.
Right.
So what happened?
Then I started going to warehouses, different warehouses like HEB through this temp agency. And then I ended up at Shipley's warehouse right there on North Main.
Okay.
And I worked there for like about 2 years. And then, but my primary goal was to get on to the city because everybody said, they're not gonna hire no ex-felon for the city. And I love challenges. When somebody tell me I can't do something, that make me more eager to do it. And I went to the city, I filled out like about 20 applications. And finally, they hired me. And
you are still at the city?
I'm still at the city right
7
today.
years later.
7 years later, right.
So do you like your job?
I like my job.
What do you do?
I work in the public works, street maintenance. I repair the streets,
Okay.
wheelchair ramps and sidewalks and driveways.
All right. So you go out with a crew every day?
About the crew, it's a 5-man crew. We have a cement truck with a head rack on it with all our tools and equipment.
Cool. Well, that sounds like a good job. So what's your relationship with the children?
With my children, I have a strong bond with all my children. And I'm so grateful to God allowing that to take place with my children. Because it was hard at first. But coming out of prison as a father, a lot of times fathers want to take control.
Yeah, you can't do that.
But I gave them control.
That's smart.
I allowed them to have control. I didn't lecture them. I didn't tell them what they need to do. I didn't indulge in their business. All I did, I just kicked it with them and loved on them. That was it. And they love me to today. And I had my youngest son, I thought it was going to be difficult because he ended up doing time. He got off into the game selling. And he said, you know what, Dad, I thought I didn't want to be around you because I felt like I disappointed you. And I'm like, I'm the one should be, telling him that I disappointed him.
Right.
And that's when we just bond. He said, Dad, you're not like they say you are, you cool, And that's how you have to do with the young generation. You have to let them be themselves. You have to hear them out. Right. Because the way they conduct themselves is for a reason. We don't want to admit it, but it's something that have affected them to carry out the way they act at times.
So do you think he's can stay out of prison, or can you help him stay out, or is he going to keep going back, your son?
I know I can help him stay out. He's not going back.
He's not going back, okay.
I'm just the strategy and the plan that I have. I told him, you just watch me. And he did that. He lived with me for about a month. And that's all it took. And I talked to him about a week, and he's working and, you know, doing the right thing, going in the right direction. He got that drive to do what's right. He said, I don't want to go back, Dad. I want to be out here with my family.
Good. That's very good. That's very good. So tell us more. Are you still in the church? Tell me how the successes are going.
I'm still in the church.
Okay.
Still in the church. I've had a great experience in the church.
Tell me about that.
I've had the opportunity to become, I got ordained, went to school, got ordained to upgrade my credentials, because, you know, it's different from back in the old traditional when grandmother was coming up. So now the technology requires for a pastor or minister, whoever in ministry, to have credentials, knowledge more of the ministry. But I had the opportunity to deal with the youth as a youth minister, a youth pastor.
Where is that?
That was at Calvary Missionary Baptist Church over in Studewood. Okay. Right, it was used to be behind Booker T. Washington. Mm-hmm. Then I had the opportunity to be assistant pastor and youth pastor over at Jones Worship and Praise Center, AME Church, over on West Road off of 45. And God used me to work in various churches. My strongest ministry that I love is prison ministry. Having an opportunity to go back into the prisons. And I do that with a friend of mine he's over the prison ministry, a brother by the name of Hartfield, a living word. Okay. So I go with him and another mother of mine, Sister Skinner. Mm-hmm. She goes out to Rochelle, to Stringfellow. Mm-hmm. I have an opportunity to go out with her. Good. Do street ministry, help people right today. Allow people to come and live in my home, because I understand what it's like to be out there and don't have no place to stay on drugs.
Very, very good. Mm-hmm. Very, very good. It's very inspirational that you could learn so much from yourself. Like some of the other people that were out on crack, like when you were, where have they gone? I mean, have you been able to help them? Or they?
A lot of them are dead.
Dead, I knew that.
Mm-hmm. And that has affected me, because a lot of them I grew up with, and I'm like, wow.
What
I'm
happened?
like, God, what did you see in me? And they wasn't worse off as I was. I was so bad that the crackheads used to tell me to go home.
Dang, that's bad when the crackheads
Not the dope dealer, but the crackheads.
The other crackheads.
Yeah, and I'm like, why did this person get took out? Why did this person, you know, from abusive died, you know? Some of them then lost their mind. I'm talking about strong, influential, had the opportunity of scholarships to go in college. I'm talking about with high grade point averages. A lot of them is just still strung out.
Wow.
And then it's some that have, you know, become successful, entrepreneurs, having business, working good jobs. But a lot of them, majority of them that's still on, they dead.
Wow. Do you think crack is as bad now in 2015 as it was back in the 1990s, early 90s?
No.
I don't think so either. That's my feeling. What do you think, Rudy? Have you noticed anything?
You see it less.
You see it less.
In the 80s, it was like war, like what's going on now.
Right.
Like terrorists and things.
It was a war zone in the neighborhoods.
It was a war zone.
My aunt had a business in San Antonio. She was a beautician off New Braunfels in the Wheatley Courts my life. And then when I was young, and they moved a little bit further down, but still on New Braunfels Street, which is MLK, I think.
Right.
Well, it's close to MLK, but it's New Braunfels Street. It leads into Fort Sam. And she was out there she's 86, I think now, 85, 86. But as a young woman, she was a beautician from 18 all the way, her whole life. When the crack came, she had to leave her business because crackheads had no respect. Heroin addicts had respect for people. They would still watch your plays and you could control them. But those crackheads, they had no regard for respecting people's businesses or properties. They'd break in every other day. You know, it was a war zone. People had businesses.
Yes.
A lot of people, young people now don't understand the black community doesn't have black businesses anymore because the black people had to shut down. Crack shut them down.
Exactly.
And when the Vietnamese came after the war, called the boat people, you know, they settled in those old businesses. You know, they bought the little neighborhood stores and they lived there in the back and they worked there. But the black people had shut those stores down. They were just there
Right.
because it was a war zone in the black community. That black on black crime was awful back then. And there was no respect.
No respect.
No respect. Because in the day, my aunt could be there and all the dope fiends would come through and bring the hot stuff in there. And, you know, they'd come in there and play and rest and get some coffee. But, and if anybody tried to bother them, they said, that's Mona's place. Don't. In fact, there was a corner named after her in the Wheatley Court. It's called Mona's Corner because she had a daughter that was an invalid. And they would watch her, my cousin, while she would go do things. But once that crack came, it was a totally different,
Right.
it was a totally different monster. So do you think it was like that? Did you find it to be that crack people were more vicious and violent?
They were more vicious back in the 80s than now.
Right.
Very
Well, you
vicious.
said that crack experience made you vicious.
Right, it did.
Do you feel, I've gone to a class one time, and it's just scientific, that said that one of the reasons why it's hard for people to get off methamphetamine and crack is the way that it affects your brain, like a lot of your endorphins or your happy hormones are killed and destroyed. And so you're never going to actually be as happy. And one of the reasons why you keep chasing that drug is because you want that happy feeling, but
Right.
you're not going to get it again.
Right.
Because it actually destroys some of those zones in your brain. Do you think that? Have you ever,
I
Felt
don't
anything?
believe that.
you still happy?
I'm still happy.
Okay.
That's what I used to ask God, am I human? Because the effect that crack took on some of my friends, it had an effect, man. I'm 50 and energetic and healthy, and I mean, my thinking is keen.
Wow.
Very, very observative, you know, very keen.
That's good.
Right.
So,
So
you're
it-
just lucky all the way around, huh?
I just blessed.
What about your paralysis in your arm? How's your arm doing?
It's strong.
Okay. How long did it take for it to get strong again?
It took me practically a year, and I did my own therapy
While in jail?
while in jail. It took a year for me to get full strength. I started working out with it, just writing, because I love to write, and then
And you were right-handed?
right-handed,
And you got shot in your right
right.
hand or
And
arm?
I started writing, then I started squeezing the ball, and then eventually I got to where I could do push-ups, and then from there lifting weights.
That's good. Do you work with any cocaine or Narcotics Anonymous programs?
I don't like that.
Did you do them in prison?
I hated them
Okay. Why did you hate them?
because it provokes you to go back.
And why do you think that?
Because they talk more about the problem than rather the solution for the problem, even in the meetings. And because I had got a new parole officer, and she didn't know my file. And I'd been out like about 12 years. And she said, well, you didn't go to NA and NA. I said, yes, I did. I said, ma'am, I've been out 12 years. I'm a convict parolee. And so she sent me over there, so I said, I'm not going to argue with her. And she said,
She
so I
sent you
went
where?
over at on that AA. And they had it smoked out in there and everything. So I went, I say, she
You know
looked-
what's so interesting? You said that all of the ex-cons
Yeah.
that I know that were crackheads, they smoke heavily.
Right.
Yeah, they smoke.
And they had it smoked out up in there, and I was like,
What's
so
that mean, smoked out?
cigarettes and
Okay, that's what I thought.
coffee, and they just
That's all they do is
had
coffee and cigarettes.
more problems, and I was like, it took so much out of me. And I told her, I can't do that anymore.
See, it was,
She
it
said,
was too
why? I
depressing.
said, because it made me sick and depressed. She said, I noticed, yeah, you're not, your morale seems as it's down. I said, it took an effect on me. And I just don't like NA. I went to drug rehabs, and I was getting high now. You got, it's a individual
It's a mind thing.
decision. It's a mind thing.
It's a mind thing. What can we tell? We got about 10 minutes left. It's gone by so fast. And we haven't had any of our regular callers call. I don't know if the phone's ringing or if they're just interested in your story because they usually call in. But what would you say to someone that was 18, 19, 20 selling crack? How can we, the adults, stop them? What can we say to them?
A lot of the teenagers have gifts. They have a desire to do what's right, to be successful, but they just don't have nobody to bag them up. We have become so occupied with our own agendas until we really think that we have time, but we don't have time. And I'm talking about quality time. And that's what I do. I made up my mind. I said, I'll never get too busy where I can't take time out to deal with a life that's in need. A life is more important than anything because life comes from God.
That's true.
And so that's what a lot of them tell me, man, I need somebody to bag me up, really have my back, support me, even when I mess up.
Right.
Don't degrade me or down me, and that's what it is. As soon as they mess up, you know, they lock them up, want to, you know, talk about them, their parents, you know, so who do they go to? The streets, the gangs, you know, somebody that's going to accept them. And they, you know, they handle them up, but that's what I would that'd be the reason I would say for a 19, 18, 20-year-old. Let them know you that fun, walk them through it. Don't be with them for a month, then they don't hear from you for 2 or 3 months. You got to be persistent with these youngsters nowadays.
And do you think the kids should find somebody in their family that they can role model with? Because sometimes people have their own kids and their own lives, and it's only so much you can do. But like you had your uncles,
Right.
and your father, even
Right.
though you were having a conflict with your father, but he was still there.
Right, he was still out, right.
So do you think they can find someone like in the neighborhood or that might help them?
Yeah, there's some men in the neighborhood that can help them, that's successful, that want to help them.
And the gang problem is so much worse. When you were getting in trouble in 89 and 90, the gangs weren't real prevalent, were they?
They were.
They were?
Yes.
I didn't remember that.
They were. They were more low key. But now you got these youngsters.
I mean, you weren't
Right.
tattooed all up. We got a phone call? What? All right. Thank you for calling Truth and Justice with Vivian King. You're on.
Hey, I like you doing that, Miss King.
Hey, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm doing Mr. Tharon and Mr. Cantu. Cantu, right?
Correct.
Got it.
Okay, yeah. I just want to let you know, I was calling because the story was so interesting. I've enjoying the story. I want you to hear it. It sounds like a good happy ending, like a good ending. Started out bad. I'm like reading the book or something. You know, you got a good story, that Mr. Bush.
Oh, thank you.
Bush, yeah, he has a good story, doesn't it? Started off sad, but ended up good.
Yeah, it sounds like it's getting better and better as you go along with it.
I know it. We haven't even gotten to his wifey and his 8-year-old. It makes him happy.
I was caught in so much support. You know, I wasn't caught in trying to hide that. I just, I was just listening. I'm watching it actually online.
Thank you for watching online, Tracy. I appreciate you.
Okay, then. Thank you, Mr. Bush, for coming on, and thank you for taking my call, Ms. King.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. All right, we have another caller. Go ahead. Speak.
Hi, this is Miss Rogers speaking. Miss Rogers speaking.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to tell a young man, on your program right now, he is wonderful. You tell him that like it is. We as people, we don't have compassion once they make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
We need to go back to the compassion and love.
Right.
God said love. He didn't say deny them. Let them know they in love. You're in love with them.
Yes, ma'am.
They help them through their crisis. Everybody in the world has family like that, but we need to go back and helping our family with compassion and love and concern. Just like they were when they was a baby. If I love you with a baby, I should love you now regardless of what you do.
I agree with you, Miss Rogers. Thank you so much for watching and calling in.
Okay, baby. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you. All right, we have 4 minutes, believe it or not. So you've been talking a lot, so I'm going to end with you, Rudy, if you like. So if you have any comments or closing remarks, and we're going to go like this, and then this. So you go first. What do you want to say to wrap it up? It could be what you've learned, what you want young people to know about, whatever message or mantra you live by, you can say that.
I look at life as unlimited. Always see yourself as unlimited, or whatever you trying to be successful in, whatever your goals in. Always have an unlimited mind.
Well, thank you. That's a great comment. And Mr. Cantu, what would you like to close on?
Mr. Bush, you mentioned locked up. Can you tell us a little bit more about what locked up means for the young people that are out there watching the program tonight and have never been incarcerated?
Right.
What do you teach them of a person being held within 4 walls, and
Right.
how hard that is for them to avoid going to that?
For me, it was very hard because
What do you think? How do you cope with that, being by yourself?
right, I had to really keep myself occupied, because a lot of times I seem, losing my mind of being in a cell like that. It's not even having to do with people, but just you look around in walls and bars, and
Right.
of steel bunk. And so that's what, sometimes that would just drive me, and I would either read or do something, you know, to keep my mind occupied or talk to someone that I could trust.
So it's not a fun place to be in.
It's not
correct?
a fun place. You never can make adjustments. You know what I'm saying? You never can. You never can get comfortable. Your life is always threatened. You never know who dislike you or who against you. You could get set up. You can get lied on.
And on the other end, liberty. Why don't you talk about liberty now?
Liberty, freedom.
Correct. Freedom, like today.
Incarceration made me realize that liberty is valuable.
Okay.
It is very valuable. And in order to gain it back, it's gonna cost you something. You're gonna have to sacrifice, yes, and you're gonna have to submit in order to gain your liberty. Not only gain it, but to keep it. And that's where a lot of people mess up. I'm gonna get out. See, my thing was staying out.
Correct.
I wasn't focusing on getting out. I knew I was gonna get out if I didn't, you know. But I said if they did, my thing was that I had my mind made up. I was gonna stay out of the system. And that's what made me realize the importance of being free, of having liberty. And it's a big difference. And not just free, you know, physically, but in your mind. That's the place you have to really start. You have to unlock your mind up. And then once you unlock your mind up, you're ready to deal with society, this free world. Some people can't deal with it that come from behind those prison walls. Never be the same because of the things that they experience and are taken advantage of. Can you imagine your manhood taken, and you know, you have to fight. Some
men are really trying to take your manhood.
Yeah, some guys in there, they weak.
They just get punked.
And they put them out, they just get punked.
Physically, sexually.
Physically.
Sexually.
Right, regularly at that. They just pass them around, sell them around like they're a prostitute. So is it worth selling crack?
To be sold, your body
Right.
sold into prison?
Right,
Like a prostitute?
right. Going into the system, and you're not guaranteed to come out.
People get killed in prison.
Right, I'm a living witness. I got caught up in so many riots.
Wow. Well, that's deep. What do you
Right.
think? That's deep. That's another story in itself.
Right,
isn't it?
it is.
Especially those times, because people were really violent, and that's when that crack was high, and people were really. I mean, like I said, it seems like it's cooling off. Maybe it's just because I'm older, but it just seems like it's cooling off. It doesn't seem like the crack is as prevalent as it was.
No, not the crack.
What is it now? Pills?
Kush.
Kush? I forgot what that is. What's Kush?
Is that artificial marijuana?
Right, synthetic, right.
Synthetic, okay.
Right, Kush, and just mostly everybody drink. A lot of folks getting back from that crack.
Yeah, they drink that syrup.
Right, drink beer, you know.
Beer.
It's good, like folks going back to the normal.
Normal legal drugs,
Yeah.
huh? Well, we're being told to wrap up. So I hope you enjoyed Mr. Bush's story. Thank you very much, Mr. Cantu, for sitting at the table with me and co-hosting tonight. We didn't have much to say tonight because Mr. Bush had a long, interesting story, a very good story, and I think that's why not many people called us tonight. But thank you for listening to the Success After Incarceration story of Mr. Bush, and we'll see you next Wednesday night with another story. Good night. Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I